Hey guys, it's time for another book review. It's been a while, and I just finished a book that was really amazing. I've read a lot of books in my life, and I don't easily throw out 10 out of 10 scores. But this is probably a 9.6, a 9.8, something wild like that. The only thing is, you read books for different reasons. You read books for instruction, read books for motivation, for entertainment, for general, like, literary aesthetic appeal. Sometimes you just read them for stories. You read them for knowledge. And so sometimes the books that are true 10 out of 10s kind of feed all of those interests and those desires, right? This was entertaining and uplifting, etc., but it was much more instructional and motivational than it was, literary or entertaining in the normal sense of, like, fun. But I had a lot of fun reading it. It is Beyond Order by Jordan Peterson. I read his second book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And they're very similar books as far as the way they are structured. You have 12 rules, suggestions, whatever you want to call them. And I'll do a full book review on 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. But this, I just barely finished yesterday, so I figured I'm going to review it now. And the other one, I'll have to go back and read my notes and everything. But I'm going to try to not be too long because there's a lot of stuff to cover here. It's not the biggest book in the world, but, it's a hefty 375 pages with a pretty dense type. But the thing I love about this book is somebody was asking me about it, and I didn't have much time to explain, and I said, to me, it's basically hyper intellectualized self-help, because I think nowadays everybody, whether they want to admit it or not, everybody likes self-help. Everybody likes at least the idea of improving themselves, of becoming better people, of becoming more useful to society, being able to use our talents in a more efficient way. People like being productive. People like being seen as useful. And so self-help is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry right now, as it should be. And there are a million ways to self-improve and to self-motivate. But what I like about this is it's not your classic, it's not full of kind of easy cliches and sayings that you already knew. It's not just like getting your butt into gear. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's what you need to hear. Sometimes you need to hear somebody who's been through tough stuff and has accomplished a lot, just kind of tell their story. And along the way, they kind of give you, some little hints about how to stay motivated, how to stay on the path, how to stay focused. I think everybody, if they had a gun to their head, so to speak, could become very successful. Like, we intrinsically have the tools, but we're naturally lazy, we naturally procrastinate, we naturally get tied into things we shouldn't get tied into, our minds wander, our focus derails. There's a million things that go into it. And what I like about this is he basically gives you these templates, these ways of approaching life to better your life without it feeling like, oh, duh, I need to work harder. I need to get up earlier. I need to freaking do my best. Duh, And it's backed up with a lot of science, a lot of research, because he's a clinical psychologist, he's a professor. He's not just like a media mogul or an entrepreneur that is rich because he works 18 hours a day and networks like crazy and knows how to work social media. He really dives deep into stuff that has to do with your brain and your heart and what really motivates human beings. And so he talks a lot. I wrote down a few things, some kind of themes that he touches a lot, and then I want to read over some of my favorite little passages. But he talks a lot about self-honesty. And really this whole book and so much of his stuff, if you like this review and it sounds interesting, I'm sure you've heard of Jordan Peterson, but if you want to acquaint yourself but aren't ready to tackle a big kind of heavy book, he's got 1 million videos on YouTube. He has lecture series. He has really interesting political debates. I don't love the political stuff, but it's really actually, in my opinion, very sound, kind of non-political stuff. He's not a politician. He's not pushing an agenda on you. He's just talking about facts. But anyways, there's a ton of content out there. He has his podcast, so if you want to acquaint yourself, you can easily do it. But in all of his content, he talks a ton about just being honest with yourself and realizing what you're doing and basically being accountable to yourself. And it sounds so easy, but if you really stop and think about how dishonest you are with yourself all the time, it's crazy. And this book kind of illuminated that fact for me. Elucidated too, that works. But because it's not like you outright lie to yourself. I don't wake up in the morning and say, "Hey Taylor, you're 250 pounds. You're jacked out of your mind, dude." And then go about my day thinking that I'm jacked. You don't tell yourself ridiculous, unbelievable lies. You tell yourself tiny little narratives that help you sleep at night. You tell yourself that you're doing an okay job when you're doing a terrible job. You tell yourself things that help you deal with the way you're living, that deal with you doing things you shouldn't be doing. So a lot of it comes back to really just being freaking honest with yourself. And I love that because I think everybody thinks they are, but when you really break it down and break down all the little sections of your life, there's a lot of things that you don't confront. A lot of things, when they do come up, you shove them away. You put them under the rug, in the closet, wherever you put them, in the garage. And it's just, he explains in very scientific terms how counterproductive that is. And I like that. He talks a lot about nihilism and kind of the fruitlessness of nihilism. Not just from and it's not just his general opinion or him pontificating on it or philosophizing. It's more just the truth of how valuable life is, even if you think it's not, and even when you're suffering, and even when life is hell. He talks about the value of life. And it's cool because it's not, I'm a religious dude, I'm a Christian dude, but when you're reading stuff like this, I'm not necessarily looking for religious content or dogma. I get that elsewhere, and when I go seek it, that's what I want. But he is Christian, and he intertwines gospel teachings, parables from the Bible, allegories of Christ. He twists that in a lot, and it works even if you're atheist or don't believe, if you're agnostic or you're a wavering Christian. It doesn't matter. It's not religious content, but he ties in, I guess, a spiritual or metaphysical element to things, which I like. He talks about the importance of art, the importance of beauty. One of my favorite chapters in here, he basically is talking about the importance of cleaning your room. And he talks about how anytime, as a clinical psychologist, anytime he gets a new patient, one of the first things he asks is, do you keep a clean room? And like, how clean do you keep it? And that's like the first assignment. And he's like, you know, basically, if you can't keep your room clean and tidy, then how do you expect to have other things clean and tidy in your life? Like, if your room is a mess, it doesn't mean your life is a mess, but you can understand the correlation. And it's easy to give up on things. You know, you train your brain. If you give up on organizing your desk or give up on trying to clean your room and it's just always a disaster, then there's other little things you're going to give up on easily, because you've trained your brain to think that's okay. And so the cool thing is he goes really deep into it, and he talks about how not only should you have a clean room, but you should have a room that you love, that has artwork in it, and that has tokens of your life and things that you care about, things that you're passionate about. He's like, because you spend so much of your day and so much of your time in your room, it should be a place that you enjoy being in, a place that you love. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And he goes way deep into how important owning art is. And I thought that was really cool from a psychological standpoint. And he talks a lot about being agreeable, about being likable. And he says, you know, the main reason people get divorced is because they're not agreeable. They're difficult people. And people will say like, well, that's just who I am. That's my personality. I'm difficult. Okay, sorry, change, is basically what he's saying. I really hate that phrase when people say, you know what, you do you. Yeah, if you're Elon Musk, you do you. But if you're not working very hard and you're not getting things done and you are a tyrant to be around and you're very argumentative and you're contentious, don't do you. Do somebody else. Be better, basically. And, you know, he talks a lot about potential and a lot about gratitude. These are kind of the the meat of the book. Now I want to read a couple things. And these are going to be a little scattered because I'm not going to give you a ton of context here, but just some things that really stood out to me. This and what I do in my books usually is I usually underline things with a nice, nice cute pen. But when they really, really, really stick out, I hit them with that highlighter, baby. So I'm hitting you with things that I've highlighted for the most part. He says, arrogance bars the path to learning. And I thought that was cool. Think about it. How can you learn and progress in any quadrant of your life if you're so arrogant that you don't think you need to learn? Arrogance bars the path to learning. Moving on. This chapter he's talking about potential. He's talking about working hard. The name of the chapter is Imagine Who You Could Be and then aim single-mindedly at that. He says, you are not only something that is, you are something that is becoming. And the potential extent of that becoming also transcends your understanding. Really cool way of saying, like, you have no idea. You don't even understand your own potential. That's how big it is. Whew. We're cruising. This is probably my favorite chapter. It's called Do Not Hide Unwanted Things in the Fog. And he talks about how you can't just bury your head in the sand and expect your problems to go away. Like, no matter what they are, if they're mental, they're spiritual, financial, whatever, you got to face them head on. And he talks about fighting in your relationships and how important it is to kind of hash things out instead of avoiding them. He says, first, if something happens every day, it is important. Because he's talking about this little thing like this husband was getting bugged because every time they had lunch, she would do this little thing. I don't even remember what it was, but it pissed him off. And he's like, if it happens, he says this a lot. He says, if something happens every day, it isn't trivial. Even though you think in your head, like, it's not a big deal. Like, she gets out of the shower, she drips everywhere. It's stupid. She should just put a towel on the floor or something, or dry off in the shower. I don't know. But there's water on the floor, and I have to clean it up. But guess what? She showers every day. So you got to face that battle. Next page, he says, do not pretend you are happy with something if you are not. And if a reasonable solution might, in principle, be negotiated, have the damn fight. I like that. We got to move on. We got to move on. Let's see. Again, he's talking about your ability to change. He says, and part of you must therefore die so that you can change. And that's why people don't freaking change. You got to leave a part of you behind, right? If you're addicted to something, that thing probably brings you a lot of pleasure, a lot of satisfaction. You know, the negatives might outweigh the pros, but it's hard to stop, so you don't. But also you don't stop because a part of you is going to be left behind. A part of you is going to die, and you have to realize that. You have to be honest with yourself. A part of you must therefore die so that you can change. That's heavy, dude. Moving on. This, he's talking about relationships. I love this because he's talking about, you know, so many people that are married and been married for years. They talk about the spark is gone, the love is faded, whatever. And he says, well, you know, and he talks a lot about how that won't happen if you try, you know, if you make an effort to go on one date every week, no matter what, you make time for romance, you communicate daily, blah, 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 a million little things. But he says, for each person is in truth an unfathomable enigma. With care, you might keep rediscovering in the person you have chosen enough residual mystery to maintain the spirit that first brought you together. Is that beautiful? I mean, think about it. People are so complex. People are so complex and mysterious. Think about how much you don't really understand about yourself. You know, you can continue to learn something about somebody until the day they die, and you should, if you love them. We're wrapping up, I promise. Again, this is in the same vein, talking about having those fights. And he talks about how a lot of people get kind of stultified because they start having a fight, start having an argument, the other person starts to cry, and the other person backs off. Fight's over. But he says, if you leave the person alone because of their tears, they quit suffering right then, but continue with their unresolved problem until they solve it, which might be never. And he says, if you can get past tears, you can have a real conversation. And you know what? It's true, dude. Think about all your breakups you know, wild DTR, terrible relationship conversations you've had that have involved salt in your eyes and water. If you can get past that, you can have a real productive conversation. But if you can't, you'll just be scared that, oh, if I say this, they'll cry. You're just going to tiptoe around things forever. It's darkness. Last but not least, this is in the final chapter. He's talking about gratitude for the most part. The chapter's all about gratitude. And he says, he's talking about love, and then he says blah, 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 says something about love, and then he says, and that, meaning love, that seems to me to be the fundamental decision of life. What? Is it that simple? Is it that simple to choose or decide to love? Whether it be to love yourself, to love your partner, to love your fellow man. It's really simple, but I think he nailed it on the head. And he says, maybe that is the definition of gratitude, of thankfulness, and I cannot see how that is separate from courage and love. That's yummy. That's yummy. I mean, think about it. How can you be grateful without love in your heart? Even if you're just grateful for yourself, you're grateful for your talents, you're grateful that you freaking woke up in the morning. And whether it's grateful to a deity, or you're grateful to your spouse, or your employer, whatever. It involves love and it involves courage. We did it. Listen, this is a great book. It's funny. I was listening to this podcast and Jordan Peterson said, I think 90 to 95% of his YouTube viewers or subscribers or something are men. And, you know, he targets a lot of young men and kind of the problems facing them, you know, addiction to video games, pornography, laziness, lack of responsibility. He kind of targets young men. But his stuff is so applicable for any human being. It's not for men. It just kind of targets them, or it maybe appeals to them a little bit more. But I've heard a lot of girls kind of criticize him because he has some videos where he sort of dismantles some weak arguments about feminism and stuff. So if you're a hyper feminist, you're probably not going to like him because he's not hyper liberal. But like, dude, nothing in this book talks about feminism or how men are better than women, something stupid like that. So if you can open your brain a little bit and forget about some clickbaity videos you might have heard about, his writing's amazing. So hopefully some girls that haven't heard of him or haven't given him a chance, give him a chance, because I recommend it oh so highly. And like I said, I'll make sure and go back and review his previous book. His first book, Maps of Meaning, is really a textbook, basically, from one of his courses, and it's massive, and I haven't read it yet, but I'd like to read that eventually. So thanks for tuning in, and if you have any questions about the book, any books you'd like to see me review, I have a million books I've read that I haven't reviewed, so I will probably do those first. But if you get a sense for my taste and my interests and have a wild suggestion, I might take it. Okay? So, we'll see you later.